Murder and Memorabilia, Episode 10, The Rotary Phone. By Win Valentine. The phone had been ringing for 3 days. Not continuously, that would have driven Calla insane by now. But the rotary phone had developed a pattern. 3 sharp rings at exactly 3:17 a.m., 11:42 a.m., and 7:28 p.m. Each time, Calla would rush to the red shelf, lift the heavy black receiver, and hear nothing but static, punctuated by what sounded like sobbing. "Hello?" she'd say into the void. "Who is this?" The crying would stop. The line would go dead, and she'd be left staring at a 1940s phone that wasn't connected to anything, wondering who was trying so desperately to reach someone and why they couldn't get through. Baxter had taken to hiding in the storage room whenever the ringing started. Smart dog. The label beneath the phone read in her careful script, "Item, the rotary phone, history. Last used to call police about Mayor Harrison's accident in 1967. Rumor. Rings when someone is about to make a desperate call for help. Status, active. Ringing on schedule. No connection established." But this morning felt different. The phone sat silent, its black surface reflecting the early light. The air around it seemed charged, expectant, as if something was building toward a crescendo. Calla updated her notes. Day 4. Pattern established. 3:17 a.m., 11:42 a.m., 7:28 p.m. Caller distressed but unable to communicate. Investigate local emergency situations. She'd barely finished writing when the morning's first disruption arrived. Elena Rodriguez burst through the shop door at 9:30 a.m., her usually perfect composure shattered. As head librarian and unofficial keeper of Summerwind's historical records, Elena was typically the calmest person in any crisis. Today, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Calla, I need your help," Elena said, clutching a manila folder to her chest. "Something's happening to the elderly residents at Sunrise Manor, and I think someone's trying to cover it up." Sunrise Manor was Summerwind's only assisted living facility, a converted Victorian mansion that housed 23 residents, most of whom had lived in town their entire lives. "What kind of something?" Elena opened the folder, revealing a stack of death certificates, medical records, and newspaper clippings. In the past 6 months, 7 residents have died, all ruled natural causes, all between the ages of 78 and 85. That's not unusual for an assisted living facility. It is when they all tried to call for help in the hours before they died. Elena's voice shook. The manor's phone logs show multiple attempted calls to 911, family members, even me. But none of the calls went through. The facility claims their phone system has been having technical difficulties. Calla felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. What kind of technical difficulties? The kind that only seem to affect outgoing calls when residents are in distress. Incoming calls work fine. Internal calls between rooms work fine. But when someone tries to call for help, Elena spread the phone logs across the counter. Nothing. The timestamps made Calla's blood run cold. The attempted calls clustered around 3 specific times: 3:17 a.m., 11:42 a.m., and 7:28 p.m., the exact times the red shelf phone had been ringing. "Elena," she said carefully, "have you talked to anyone else about this?" "I tried. But Dr. Peterson, the manor's medical director, says I'm seeing patterns that aren't there. Sheriff Ellis says she can't investigate deaths that have already been ruled natural. And the families?" Elena's voice cracked. "The families just want to grieve in peace." Before Calla could respond, the shop door chimed again. Dr. James Peterson entered. his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by something harder, more calculating. "Elena," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I thought I might find you here." Elena stiffened. "Dr. Peterson." "I understand you've been asking questions about our residents passing, questions that are causing unnecessary distress to grieving families." His tone was professionally sympathetic, but his eyes were cold. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "I think Elena's questions are perfectly reasonable," Calla said. 7 deaths in 6 months seems worth investigating. Peterson's smile never wavered. 7 elderly people with multiple health conditions died of natural causes in an assisted living facility. It's unfortunate, but hardly suspicious. He turned back to Elena. "I'm concerned about your mental state. You've been under a lot of stress lately. The library budget cuts, your mother's illness. Perhaps you need some time off." The threat was subtle but clear. Stop asking questions or face consequences. Elena gathered her papers with shaking hands. "I should go." "Elena," Calla called as she reached the door. "If you need anything at all, call me." Elena nodded and left. Peterson lingered. "Miss Finch," he said, his tone shifting to something more familiar, almost friendly. "I hope you won't encourage Elena's obsession. These conspiracy theories could damage the manor's reputation. And reputation is everything in a small town, don't you think?" After he left, Calla stood in her empty shop, mind racing. 7 deaths, blocked phone calls, a medical director more concerned with reputation than investigation, and a red shelf phone that had been receiving the calls that never went through. She walked to the back room and stared at the rotary phone. For the first time since the ringing started, she spoke to it directly. "Who are you trying to reach?" The phone remained silent. But in its black surface, she caught a reflection that wasn't her own. An elderly woman with frightened eyes, reaching for something just out of frame. Calla spent the afternoon at the Summerwind library, researching everything she could find about Sunrise Manor and its recent residents. What she discovered was disturbing. The 7 deceased residents had several things in common. They were all long-time Summerwind natives, they all had substantial savings or valuable property, and they all had recently updated their wills to include significant donations to the manor's improvement fund. More troubling was the pattern of their deaths. Each resident had been found alone in their room, door locked from the inside, no signs of struggle. Each had apparently died of natural causes: heart failure, stroke, medication complications. Each had been discovered by the same staff member, Nurse Patricia Vance. Patricia had worked at Sunrise Manor for 8 years. She was beloved by residents and families alike, known for her compassion and dedication. She often worked double shifts, staying late to comfort residents who couldn't sleep, bringing them tea and conversation in the dark hours before dawn. When Calla cross-referenced Patricia's shift schedules with the times of death, she found something else troubling. Patricia had been working alone, no other staff present, every time one of the 7 residents died. She was gathering her research when Marcus Chen approached her table. Marcus was a local reporter for the Summerwind Gazette, known for his dogged pursuit of stories others preferred to ignore. "Researching the manor deaths?" he asked quietly. Calla looked up, surprised. "What makes you think that?" "Because I've been investigating them for weeks. And because you're the 3rd person this month to pull those same records." Marcus sat down across from her. "Elena Rodriguez was here last week. And before that, someone I didn't recognize. Elderly woman, very agitated." "Did you get her name?" "Rose Mitchell. She was asking about her sister, Grace, who died at the manor 3 months ago. Said Grace had called her the night she died, terrified, claiming someone was trying to hurt her. But the call cut off mid-sentence. And when Rose tried to call back, she couldn't get through." Calla began to see connections, but they weren't connections she liked. "What did you find?" Marcus pulled out a notebook. The Manor's phone system was, quote, upgraded 8 months ago by a company called Secure Comm Solutions, supposedly to improve security and emergency response. But the upgrade included a feature that allows management to monitor, record, and even block outgoing. That's not legal. It is if it's disclosed in the admission paperwork, buried on page 47 of the service agreement, in language so dense most people skip it entirely. Marcus leaned forward. I think someone at the Manor has been using that system to prevent residents from calling for help when they realize they're in danger. Someone? I'm not sure yet. Could be Peterson. He has access to the system and would know how to manipulate medical records. Could be Patricia Vance. She has the most contact with residents and would know their routines, their vulnerabilities. Could be both of them working together. Marcus paused, checking to make sure they weren't overheard. Or it could be someone else entirely. Someone who's been very careful to stay in the background, while the more visible staff. At 11:42 a.m. the next day, the Rotary phone. This time, when Calla lifted the receiver, she didn't hear static. She heard a voice, weak, elderly, terrified. Please, the voice whispered. Someone help me. She's coming back. She said the tea would help me sleep, but I know what she's really doing. Who is this? Calla asked urgently. Where are you? Room 12, Sunrise Manor. My name is Dorothy Walsh. If something happens to me, tell my grandson. Tell him I love him. Tell him I tried to call. The line went dead. Calla's hand shook as she set down the receiver. Dorothy Walsh was one of the current residents at Sunrise Manor, an 82-year-old former schoolteacher who'd moved in 6 months ago after a fall at home. According to the records Calla had seen, Dorothy was in good health for her age with no major medical issues. But if the pattern held, Dorothy Walsh would be dead. Calla grabbed her phone to call Sheriff Ellis, but stopped when she realized what she was dealing with. A supernatural phone call from someone who might already be dead, reporting a murder that hadn't happened yet, by someone whose identity she could only guess at. Ellis would think she'd lost her mind. Instead, she called the Manor directly. Sunrise Manor, this is Patricia speaking. I'd like to visit Dorothy Walsh in room 12, Calla said. I'm her niece from out of town. A pause. I'm sorry, but Mrs. Walsh isn't feeling well today. She's been having some confusion, and Dr. Peterson thinks it's best if she rests without visitors. What kind of confusion? She's been claiming that someone's trying to poison her. Very distressing for the other residents. We've had to increase her medication to keep her calm. Calla's blood ran cold. I see. Well, perhaps I could just speak with her on the phone. I'm afraid our phone system is having technical difficulties again, but I'll be sure to tell her you called. The line went dead. Calla stared at her phone, mind racing. Patricia Vance had just confirmed that Dorothy was exhibiting exactly the behavior that had preceded the other 7 deaths. Claims of being poisoned, followed by increased medication to keep her calm. But there was something else in Patricia's voice. Something that didn't match the compassionate nurse everyone described. A cold satisfaction, as if she was enjoying the game. Calla walked back to the red shelf phone and lifted the receiver. Dorothy, she said into the silence. I hear you. I believe you. And I'm coming. Sunrise Manor sat on the outskirts of Summerwind, a converted Victorian mansion that loomed against the gray afternoon sky. Its gabled roof and wraparound porch gave it an ominous presence. Calla parked across the street and studied the building. 3 stories, 23 residents, and according to the staff schedule Elena had provided, only 3 people on duty during the day shift: Dr. Peterson, nurse Patricia Vance, and a maintenance worker named Joe Hernandez. She needed to get inside, find Dorothy Walsh, and figure out how to prove what was happening without alerting whoever was behind it. The direct approach seemed best. The front door was answered by a middle-aged man in work clothes. Joe Hernandez, based on his name tag. Help you? He asked. I'm here to see Dorothy Walsh, room 12. Joe's expression darkened. You family? Niece. Then you should know. Nurse Patricia says Mrs. Walsh has been having a rough day. Talking crazy, saying people are trying to hurt her. Doc had to sedate her for her own safety. I'd still like to see her. Joe hesitated, then stepped aside. Room 12's on the second floor, but don't be surprised if she doesn't recognize you. The medication makes them pretty out of it. The interior of Sunrise Manor was all faded elegance and institutional efficiency. The grand staircase had been fitted with a chairlift, the ornate wallpaper was covered with safety notices and emergency procedures, and the whole place smelled like disinfectant, trying to mask something less pleasant. Calla climbed to the second floor, noting the locations of security cameras, fire exits, and the nurse's station. The hallway was empty except for the soft murmur of television sets behind closed doors. Room 12 was at the end of the hall. The door was closed, and a handwritten sign reading, "Do not disturb, patient resting," hung from the handle. Calla knocked softly. No answer. She tried the handle. Locked. "Can I help you?" Calla turned to find Patricia Vance standing behind her. The nurse was exactly as described, mid-40s, kind face, wearing scrubs decorated with cheerful flowers. But her eyes were cold, calculating, and definitely not friendly. "I'm here to see Dorothy Walsh. I'm her niece. I told you on the phone, Mrs. Walsh isn't receiving visitors today." Patricia's smile never wavered. She's been very agitated, making all sorts of wild accusations. We've had to sedate her for everyone's safety. What kind of accusations? The usual paranoid delusions. Claims that someone's trying to poison her, that her medication is being tampered with. Very common in elderly patients with developing dementia. Dorothy doesn't have dementia. Patricia's smile faltered for just a moment. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. Dr. Peterson diagnosed her with early-stage Alzheimer's just last week. It's quite sad, really. These delusions often accompany the condition." "I'd like to speak with Dr. Peterson." "He's not available. But I can assure you that Mrs. Walsh is receiving the best possible care." Patricia stepped closer, and Calla caught a whiff of something medicinal on her clothes. "Perhaps you should come back next week, when she's feeling more stable." Calla nodded as if accepting the suggestion, then waited until Patricia returned to the nurse's station before trying Dorothy's door again. Still locked, but she noticed something she'd missed before. The lock was the kind that could be opened from the outside with a key, but the inside mechanism had been disabled. Dorothy was locked in, not simply resting. She returned to the first floor and found Joe Hernandez replacing light bulbs in the parlor. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I'm worried about Mrs. Walsh. Her door's locked from the outside. Is that normal?" Joe glanced around, then gestured for her to follow him into a supply closet. "Look," he said, closing the door behind them. "I've been working here 8 years, and I've never seen anything like what's been happening lately. 7 people dead in 6 months, all of them sharp as tacks, until suddenly they weren't." "What do you mean?" "These weren't confused old folks with dementia. These were people like Mrs. Walsh, clear-minded, independent, asking questions about their medications, their finances, and then one day, boom, they're agitated and need sedation. Next day, they're dead." Calla felt her pulse quicken. "You think someone's killing them?" "I think someone's been very careful to make it look like natural deaths. But I've been watching, and I've seen things." Joe pulled out his phone and showed her a series of photos taken through doorways and around corners. Patricia going into rooms late at night with syringes that aren't on any medication chart. Dr. Peterson altering medical records after patients die. And something else. "I found these in the dumpster behind the building." He showed her another photo, a collection of small glass vials, empty, labeled with medications that didn't match anything in the Manor's pharmacy records. "I think they've been using experimental drugs, things that would cause heart failure or stroke but wouldn't show up in a standard autopsy." Joe's voice dropped to a whisper, "And I think Mrs. Walsh figured it out." Why hasn't anyone reported this? Who would believe it? Patricia's been here 8 years, never had a complaint. Dr. Peterson's reputation is spotless, and the families are grief-stricken. They want to believe their loved ones died peacefully of natural causes. Joe checked his watch. Look, I've got to get back to work. But if you want to help Mrs. Walsh, you need to get her out of here, tonight, because if the pattern holds, she'll be dead by morning. Calla left Sunrise Manor with her mind racing and a plan forming. She couldn't prove what was happening, but she could document it. And she could make sure Dorothy Walsh lived long enough to tell her story. First, she called Marcus Chen. I need your help, she said. How quickly can you get a camera crew to Sunrise Manor? Depends. What's the story? Serial murder, disguised as natural deaths. But we need to catch them in the act. Marcus was quiet for a moment. How sure are you about this? Sure enough to stake my reputation on it. Meet me at the manor at 11 tonight. And bring Sheriff Ellis. She's going to want to see this. Next, she called Elena Rodriguez. I need you to do something that might get you in trouble, Calla said. Can you access the manor's phone records from the library's computer system? Technically, yes. The library has administrative access to most municipal systems for research purposes. But do it. Tonight. Pull everything from the past 6 months, especially outgoing call logs around the times of death. And Elena, be careful. If I'm right about what's happening, you could be in danger just for asking questions. Finally, she returned to the red shelf and placed her hand on the rotary phone. Dorothy, she said quietly, if you can hear me, hang on. Help is coming. The phone remained silent, but in its black surface, she saw another reflection. Dorothy Walsh, awake in her locked room, terrified but alert, waiting for whatever was coming next. At 10:30 p.m., Calla parked across from Sunrise Manor and surveyed the building. Most of the windows were dark, but she could see lights in the second-floor hallway and the nurses' station on the first floor. Marcus Chen arrived 5 minutes later with a portable camera and night vision equipment. Sheriff Ellis pulled up just as they were setting up. This better be good, Ellis said. I'm supposed to be at home watching Netflix, not conducting an unauthorized surveillance operation. Dorothy Walsh is in room 12, Calla explained. She's been locked in, sedated, and according to the pattern, she'll be dead by morning. We need to catch them in the act. And them. Patricia Vance and Dr. Peterson. Possibly working with others. They've been systematically murdering residents and making it look like natural deaths. Sighed. Calla pulled out her phone and played the recordings from the red shelf phone. Dorothy's terrified voice, the attempted calls for help, the blocked outgoing calls. Ellis listened, frowning. This doesn't sound like Dorothy Walsh. Her voice is different, younger, because it's not from today. The red shelf phone receives calls that couldn't get through. These are echoes of the 7 residents who tried to call for help before they died. You're asking me to believe in ghost phone calls. I'm asking you to believe in blocked emergency calls and serial murder. The supernatural element is just a bonus. Marcus had set up his camera with a clear view of the manor's second floor. Movement, he said quietly. Second floor, room 12. Through the night vision scope, they could see a figure entering Dorothy's room. The timestamp read 11:41 p.m., 1 minute before the red shelf phone always rang. That's Patricia, Calla said. She's carrying something, a syringe. They watched as Patricia approached Dorothy's bed. Even through the window, they could see Dorothy struggling weakly, trying to push the nurse away. It made the aspect in a game. All UNIF, Ellis said, reaching for her radio. All units to Sunrise Manor, possible assault. But before she could make the call, another figure appeared in the room. Dr. Peterson. He was carrying what looked like a medical bag, and he moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this before.
"They're working together," Marcus whispered, adjusting his camera to record everything.
Patricia held Dorothy down while Peterson prepared an injection. Dorothy's mouth was open. She was screaming, but no sound reached them through the window. That's when the red shelf phone rang. Not in the shop. Calla was carrying it with her. The old rotary phone somehow still connected to whatever force allowed it to receive desperate calls for help. She lifted the receiver. "Please." Dorothy's voice came through clearly. "Someone help me. They're going to kill me. Room 12, Sunrise Manor. Tell my grandson I tried to call." "Yes, her the person." "Jesus Christ," Ellis said, staring at the phone. "How is that possible?" "Does it matter?" Calla asked. "Dorothy Walsh is calling for help. Are you going to answer?" Ellis grabbed her radio. "All units, emergency at Sunrise Manor. Officers in immediate danger. Move in now." The arrest went quickly. Police surrounded the building, cutting off all exits. Ellis led the charge up to room 12, where they found Patricia Vance holding Dorothy down while Dr. Peterson prepared to inject her with something that definitely wasn't on any approved medication list. The syringe contained a synthetic compound designed to cause cardiac arrhythmia, untraceable in standard autopsies, but fatal within minutes of injection. Dorothy Walsh was weak, but alive. More importantly, she was coherent enough to give a full statement about what had been happening at Sunrise Manor. "They've been targeting residents with money," she told Ellis from her hospital bed, "getting us to change our wills, then killing us before we could change our minds. Patricia would bring tea laced with sedatives. Then Dr. Peterson would come in with his final medication. They told the families we died peacefully in our sleep." The investigation that followed uncovered 8 years of systematic murder. Patricia and Peterson had killed 17 residents, stealing over $3 million through forged wills, fraudulent insurance claims, and direct theft from residents' accounts. The phone system had been deliberately sabotaged to prevent residents from calling for help. The technical difficulties were actually a sophisticated blocking system that activated whenever residents tried to make emergency calls. Joe Hernandez had been collecting evidence for months, too afraid to report it until he found allies. Elena's research had provided the documentary proof needed to establish the pattern. Marcus's footage gave them the smoking gun, and the red shelf phone had given them something impossible to dismiss: the voices of the victims calling for help across time and death. 3 days later, Calla sat in her shop with a rotary phone silent on the red shelf. She updated its label. Item: the rotary phone. History: last used to call police about Mayor Harrison's accident in 1967. Rumor: rings when someone is about to make a desperate call for help. Status: active. Received calls from 17 murder victims across 8 years. Note: some calls for help echo across time. Listen carefully. Dorothy Walsh had recovered fully and was now living with her grandson in Oregon. The other residents of Sunrise Manor had been relocated to facilities with better oversight. Patricia Vance and Dr. Peterson were awaiting trial for 17 counts of murder. But Calla knew the real hero was an old rotary phone that had refused to let the dead stay silent. "Some calls," she said to Baxter, who was once again comfortable near the red shelf, "are too important to ignore." The phone remained quiet, but in its reflection she could see faces, not of victims this time, but of survivors. People who had been saved because someone finally listened when they called for help. Outside, summer winds settled into evening peace. The red shelf held its secrets and its truths, ready to connect those who needed help with those who could provide it. Some connections, Calla reflected, transcended the boundaries of life and death, time and space. Some calls for help would always get through, no matter who tried to block them. The phone sat ready, waiting for the next desperate voice that needed to be heard.
Thank you for listening. Please visit me at winvalentine.com to stay up to date. Please subscribe, leave a comment, and review.